Republican Senator Thom Tillis has a lot to say about why he voted against President Trump's massive tax and spending cuts bill, calling the bill politically devastating. In an exclusive interview with our Jake Tapper, Tillis said he told the president the so-called Big Beautiful Bill legislation could cost the GOP their majority in the midterms next year. CNN's Jeff Zeleny joins us now from the White House. What more did you learn from Senator Tillis in this long conversation with Jake?
Hey, Sarah, good morning. A very interesting conversation with Thom Tillis. Of course, he was one of the 3 Republican senators who voted against that big sweeping legislation. And he talked about how he actually sent a warning sign to the White House, to the president, specifically saying that this could be the president's Obamacare. By that, of course, he means it could be a big piece of legislation that would bring political fallout in the midterm elections. But Senator Tillis, the Republican from North Carolina, also said he was quite blunt with the president about the politics of the matter as well. Let's listen.
I told the president that he's clearly got the votes. That I will try and work to get something done in the House. He didn't need my vote, and that I would be respectful and quiet and try to do my work on the House side. And then I got that text that I texted him, or I saw I'd never read it, but I saw like the first sentence. I told the president in another text, I said, now it's time to start looking for my replacement because I don't deal with that kind of bull.
So there you go, an unvarnished look. It really went on behind the scenes in those hours of when the president called out Thom Tillis and said he would be looking for another Republican to primary challenge him next year. Well, then the senator said, look, I am not running for re-election. So that is one of the interesting fallouts, at least politically speaking, from that big vote just a couple weeks ago. But Sarah, it also really raises the question about what many Republicans are feeling as they head into the midterm elections here about the fallout from the Medicaid cuts in particular. That's what this senator was so worried about, the effects that he believed it would have on rural hospitals all across North Carolina.
Yeah, that's one of the many things that he talked about. There is much more to discuss on this. Thank you so much to you, Jeff Zeleny, there for us at the White House. John?
All right, with us now, CNN political commentator Karen Finney and Republican strategist Doug Heye. And I have to say, this interview with Jake and Thom Tillis, they had a lot in it. I want you to listen to this exchange between Jake and the senator on the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. And remember that Tillis really cast the deciding vote that led to Hegseth's confirmation. Listen.
I think it's clear he's out of his depth as a manager of a large, complex organization.
Yeah, what was your reaction to the Signalgate situation?
Well, that's just one. I mean, this whole idea of having a pause in Ukraine defensive arms, right. That's just amateurish. I mean, that's from somebody who doesn't understand large organization dynamics. So, I don't regret the decision I made back then based on the facts as I knew them then. But today I am beginning to wonder if maybe Armed Services was a little bit generous with respect to their assessment of his capabilities as a manager of the world's largest, most complex, and arguably consequential organization.
All right, Karen, he doesn't regret the decision back then, but now?
Now that I'm not running, I can tell you the truth, but I'm still going to say it in a measured way. This guy is in over his head, is basically what he was saying. And I think we knew that before. This is the conundrum that I think a lot of these Republican members are going to have. How do you explain to your voters in 2026, did you make a decision that was good for them or that was good for you politically with the president? This was one that he made out of politics for the president. And we're now seeing that it probably hasn't served America very well.
Yeah.
Just being a little bit honest.
Doug, what do you think about the way he said that? Because he still wasn't full on saying, I made a bad choice, and he was blaming the Senate Armed Services Committee there, but yet he still doesn't think Hegseth is doing a good job.
Yeah, look, it's a lot, and it's hard to sort of figure out exactly what he means by that. What he was saying was rather opaque, but it did sound to me very similar to what we hear very much these days as more and more books come out of, I stood by Joe Biden, he was fully there at the time. Now, in retrospect, with time passing, I see that ultimately Joe Biden wasn't there. Look, this is why Thom Tillis isn't running for re-election, and the reality is politics always play a role here. His election was going to be a very tough one. North Carolina has not had a double-digit Senate race since 1974, and obviously he was going to have a very tough primary as well.
And again, despite clear difficulties with President Trump and President Trump threatening to have him primaried in that Senate race had he run, he still seems very reluctant to criticize him directly. Listen to this.
I don't have a problem with President Trump.
Right.
I got a problem with some of the people I consider to be amateurs advising him.
What do you make when you go on
And so I
social?
want to make it very clear to them, guys,
Yeah.
when you act like the president, when he's out of the room, you don't impress me. And they'll hear more of that in the coming months.
Who are you talking about specifically? Stephen Miller?
We'll get
or?
to that.
All right, that was something, Doug, first of all. And I have to say, but isn't in this second Trump term the term where Trump is supposed to be getting everything he wants? Doesn't this run counter to the notion that in the first term it was the advisors that stopped him, but Tillis is saying, oh, the advisors are all powerful now?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure what he means by that, because in the previous clip that you had played, he blamed the president's tweet. Now, the president might not have typed that himself, but that's his Twitter or his X account. So ultimately, the decision he made was based on words that came directly from the president.
Karen?
Seem more like he is aware he may not be running for office, but he's still going to need a job when he's out. And if you anger the president, you still harm yourself in the Republican ecosystem. I think he's smart enough to know that. But again, blaming the president's staff, that you still made some decisions that you should be accountable for. I'm glad that he didn't vote for the big horrible bill. At the same time, I think he also knew politically, again, how are you going to explain in a primary to voters, many of whom will have been loyal to Trump? Then you've got to get to a general election. And this is going to be a conundrum I think that a lot of members are going to have, particularly if you are in a swing state like North Carolina, where you have a Democratic governor who's not going to, lie about why things are costing more, why hospitals are costing more. He's going to be really honest that it's the big ugly bill. And if you're someone like a Thom Tillis, you're not going to be able to explain that away either in a primary or a general election. I think he just saw the facts on the wall.
So I told the president in another text, I said, now it's time to start looking for my replacement, because I don't deal with that kind of bull.
Okay, joining me to discuss in today's group chat, Sarah Fisher, media correspondent for Axios, Charlie Dent, former Republican congressman from Pennsylvania, and Megan Hayes, former director of message planning in the Biden White House. So, Charlie, I think you know I'm coming to you, okay, because you know about exits, which you did in 2018. Help me read the code of what he was saying. The first thing I notice is he wasn't blaming Trump himself.
Well, Tillis is uncorked, and he was trying to give the president useful advice about, in this case, the Medicaid provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill, and the president ignored it. And I dealt with the same thing in 2018. I was giving the president advice about Medicaid, and I got reamed out for it, but I told him I voted against the bill. But he doesn't always take advice well. He's listening to people who don't always have his interests, and I think Tillis was referring to people like Stephen Miller and Peter Navarro and others who don't give the president very good advice. Tillis is a smart guy. He represents a swing state. He's been elected to things, unlike a lot of these people giving advice who don't understand the
But why
pressures.
don't people talk? Why do people wait until they're leaving to talk?
No, I didn't. I didn't. But I think there's a certain amount of feeling of liberation that they can say whatever they want now. They're not going to be held accountable by the voters, so they feel they can just say whatever they want. I suspect he's pretty comfortable financially. So
yeah, well, he's
having a good
being
time.
very specific about his warnings about the bill in particular. Yeah. So one of the things he was saying is that in terms of messaging, having to go out and talk about this bill, this is a problem for Republicans. Here's what he had to say about that.
I told the president, I really do believe it could be his Obamacare.
Because of the promise that he made that was not true. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor.
And now it's like, if you like Medicaid and you're eligible, you can keep it. That's fundamentally untrue, because the funding mechanisms are probably going to take people who are eligible for it off of it over time.
Megan, the boogeyman of Obamacare.
I mean, sure, people seem to like the ACA now, so that's interesting.
But it was tough going when it was being passed and talked about.
Absolutely, but it also, the voters like it, and the voters still like it, and they tried to repeal it how many times in Congress, and it didn't work. People talk now because it's not just that they're liberated now to talk, it's just because they're not, and I will give him a lot of respect for speaking up, because a lot of times people don't talk because they want to show deference, and they do it in private. and they want to be respectful, and they want to have the negotiations behind the scenes, because what's necessarily in the media isn't what's necessarily going on behind the scenes, and there's a lot moving and a lot of negotiations. But I do give him a lot of credit for coming out now. I wish he would have had a backbone earlier on some of these nominations that went through that he talked about in that interview, but I commend him for speaking out now. I just wish he would have done it earlier.